Chapter 940. Unwillingness welled up in their hearts. The old beggar and the others hated themselves for being born in the wrong era. But thinking about it, even if they were born tens of thousands of years earlier and successfully became a saint, they would still die here. Therefore, everyone was most concerned about their own lives. The old beggar did not know where his courage came from, but he questioned, "Old beggar, I just want to know one thing. How did so many Holy Spirit experts die?" The 10 sky demons and Tao ancestor Qingquan silently retreated, afraid that the martial saint would suddenly explode and kill them. The martial saint sighed helplessly. "They did indeed die at our hands." He admitted it. Those hundreds of Holy Spirit experts had indeed died at the hands of the 4 saints. "But I had no other choice." The martial saint explained, "Do you know that the spirit energy in the outside world had already dried up 200 to 300,000 years ago, and the spirit energy in the falling star continent was also constantly leaking out with this whirlpool? It was the 4 of us who worked together to set up the array to seal the spirit energy, allowing the living beings of the falling star continent to still enjoy the prosperity of spirit cultivation." Ling Shiqi and the others were somewhat skeptical. According to the 10 sky demons, the 4 saints wanted to devour the power of many Holy Spirit experts to transcend this world. But the martial saints said that they were the spirit cultivators protecting the falling star continent. Who was the one who was lying? Sacred Sovereign Wu Ji snapped his fingers, and a series of profound sacred aura arrays appeared, firmly locking the vortex in place. "This saint is not lying to you, and the 10 sky demons are not wrong. Although the 4 of us are at the peak of the Holy Spirit realm, we do not have unlimited power. Furthermore, the will of the heavens and earth has already taken away our recognition, and our power is constantly weakening. In order to continue maintaining the array, we persuaded the Holy Spirit experts to help us. However, without exception, they did not mean what they said, and all of them thought of ways to return to the falling star continent. Thus, we made a decision." At this point, he stopped talking, but everyone knew what decision they had made. That was to kill the Holy Spirit realm experts that came later and take away their power. From the looks of it, the 4 saints did not seem to be that sinister, and were thinking for the spirit cultivators of the falling star continent. But were they really so selfless? Ling Shiqi couldn't believe it. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Not to mention the 4 saints, even the current Ling Shiqi could behead countless people with a single word. If the 4 saints did not have any selfish motives, they would not have left the falling star continent so resolutely. The 10 sky demons immediately sneered, "Nonsense. You've never mentioned this. We were attacked as soon as we approached." "That's right, our original intention had always been to protect the spirit cultivators of the Starfall dynasty, but as time passed, as more and more Holy Spirit experts died at our hands, as we became more and more dissatisfied with this world, in the end, we still became bedeviled." As Sacred Venerate Wu Ji spoke, a black mark appeared between his eyebrows, causing his aura to become extremely evil. However, the imprint immediately disappeared. It's not entirely correct to say that we've gone berserk. To be precise, we've gone berserk on our own accord. Since the later generations are not willing to be with us, we can only make them stay here forever. Hundreds of thousands of years have passed, and we've absorbed a large amount of saint energy and saint souls. More than half of them have been used to maintain the formation, and the rest have been divided equally among the 4 of us. About 100,000 years ago, our strength reached an unprecedented peak. At that time, we felt that we might as well directly swallow all the power of the falling star continent, shatter the void, and transcend this world. Unfortunately, at that time, the world changed greatly. From then on, the whirlpool would erupt with great turbulence every once in a while. We had to go all out to barely maintain it. Once the formation is broken, the spirit energy of the falling star continent will dissipate within a few years. We have no time to set up anything else in advance. Until now, the number of times the whirlpool has erupted has increased, and it has been a long time since a Holy Spirit expert has entered. Our strength has been declining, until 10,000 years ago, we even had to abandon our bodies to survive in the form of saint souls. This is the truth that has been hidden for hundreds of thousands of years. Do you understand? Everyone was deeply shocked. It turned out that for hundreds of thousands of years, the four saints had endured humiliation and even took the initiative to become bedeviled. They even gave up their bodies to protect the falling star continent. Even if they had their own selfish motives, in the end, they still gave up on their selfishness. Of course, the premise of all of this was that the martial saint did not lie to them. After saying so much, it seemed like everything could be matched, but in the end, it was still the martial saint's own words. No one could verify the truth of these words. Leng Shiqi probed, in the past, there were Holy Spirit experts that came in and became your strength, and we only have a few Heaven Ascension stages. To the dignified four saints, this bit of strength is not even a drop in the ocean. Therefore, Junior dares to guess that the four Saint Lords do not want to kill us and take away our power. You can still maintain such a clear mind. Not bad. Junior will make another guess. The four Saint Venerables might still need our help, right? That's right. This time, the one who spoke was not the martial saint, but the Six Direction Saint. At the same time, the holy sage Luo Ying and the holy sage Huang Wei also appeared. The Six Direction Saint said, "The few of you are the strongest spirit cultivator in the falling star continent right now. This saint hopes that the few of you can help us a little, and wish that we can transcend the Middle Origin world. We have protected the falling star continent for hundreds of thousands of years, and we have done our best. Now, it is time for them to repay us." Although he did not say it clearly, Leng Shiqi could feel that if the four saints wanted to transcend this world, the falling star continent would not have a good ending. The four saints who had protected the continent for hundreds of thousands of years had ended up destroying the falling star continent. Leng Shiqi was not a good person, but he had planned for 10 years to devour the world. Now, the plan had been fully activated, and the two great empires were at war. If the plan went smoothly, the falling star continent would be his before long. However, at this moment, the four saints were prepared to take away his things, and even destroy them to help themselves. How could Leng Shiqi agree? Holy Sage Luo Ying continued, "First of all, you have to understand that we are not asking for your opinions. After we send you out, there are two things you need to do. First, there are 4 dragon veins in the falling star continent. I will tell you the exact location later. You must obtain those 4 dragon veins, not a single one of them can be missing. Second, this saint will give you a type of array formation. You must set it up in a set place within 10 years. If there is the slightest deviation, you should be very clear about the consequences." With that, Holy Sage Luo Ying flicked his finger, and 4 rays of golden light entered the space between Leng Shiqi and the rest's brows. They immediately knew everything. Chapter 941. Leng Shiqi carefully checked the information in his mind and the golden light. He realized that Saint Sovereign Luo Ying didn't take the opportunity to plant a restriction on them. The 4 saints were so confident. Weren't they afraid that they would go back on their words after they got out? Or was it because Saint Sovereign Luo Ying's restriction was so strong that he couldn't discover it at all? Leng Shiqi nodded obediently on the surface. He didn't dare to disobey the 4 saints in the slightest. The 10 sky demons and Tao ancestor heaven and earth were the most embarrassed. They had always hated the 4 saints to the core. Now, they had become the 4 saints' lackeys and worked for them. They definitely didn't want to, but they were already lucky to have a trace of their soul left. Now, they couldn't resist the 4 saints at all. If they didn't want to, they would die. They had no choice but to use silence to express their decision. Since. Before Saint Sovereign Luo Ying could finish her sentence, there was a sudden change. The originally calm whirlpool suddenly became violent, and the power of the world descended. The golden holy array suddenly started to spin, and endless holy power gathered. However, the whirlpool exploded too suddenly. It expanded more than twice its original size, and it was still expanding. The 4 saints were shocked. It exploded so quickly this time. Quickly, stabilize the array. The 4 saints attacked at the same time. Holy light filled the sky and gathered in the array. Saint Sovereign Luo Ying waved her hand gently, and Leng Shiqi and the others were instantly sent to the place where they came in. Her voice was also heard. Wait here. Once the array is stabilized, I'll send you out. This sudden turn of events caused the four sages to cast them aside, giving them some time to catch their breaths and digest the four sages' words. Leng Shiqi raised his hand, and two streams of black and white light shot out, isolating the surroundings. He turned around and said, that whirlpool has gone berserk, which means that Saint Venerable Wu Ji wasn't lying about this. Everyone, what are your thoughts on this? For a moment, no one answered. What? Do all the reaching heaven realm cultivators and former saint spirits have such backbone? Leng Shiqi sneered with a cold face. Then what do you want? The 10 heavenly demons roared, you have no idea how terrifying the four sages are. Don't think that just because sacred Venerable Wu Ji told you so much, you're treated as humans. In their eyes, we're not even comparable to chess pieces. Don't tell me you still want to resist? Huh, are these the 10 heavenly demons that dominated the world hundreds of thousands of years ago? In my opinion, you're no different from a wild dog. Leng Shiqi did not give the sky fiend any face and said such words. The 10 sky demons were enraged. Demonic chi surrounded them and their eyes turned blood red. Dao ancestor Qin Kuan, who was beside him, shouted, stop. Let's hear what he wants to say. Leng Shiqi first looked at the old beggar, the blue-robed man, and the disfigured youth and said, the three of you, I still don't know your names. The old beggar stroked his beard and said, Gulu. The blue-robed man continued, King of the Eastern Sea. As for the disfigured youth, he said strangely, you didn't recognize me. We met in the beast cesspool of the blood beast sect. A strange beast phantom appeared behind him. It was completely different from the one he had attacked before, but Leng Shiqi recognized it immediately. It was the venerable beast he had seen in the beast cesspool of the blood beast sect. Unexpectedly, the venerable beast was a rank 9 demon sovereign of the heavenly reaching realm. Leng Shiqi did not understand. Since the demon clan had a rank 9 demon sovereign, why were they willing to hide in the far north wilderness? No, in the past 10 years, he had met the silver-winged demon sovereign and the gale demon sovereign several times, but they did not seem to know the existence of the venerable beast at all. Also, why did the venerable beast run to the blood beast sect? One question after another appeared in Leng Shiqi's mind, but this was not the most important thing at the moment. He continued, what I want to say is very simple. The four sages are not trustworthy. We have no way of verifying anything they say. Furthermore, have you guys thought about what will happen to us after we finish everything? The 10 sky demons said disdainfully, I advise you not to think too much. The more you think, the faster you will die. If I say there is a way to leave this place, will you believe me? Leng Shiqi suddenly said something shocking. Tao ancestor Qin Kuan was surprised. Really? Leng Shiqi raised a strong netherworld aura behind him. I, Leng Shiqi, will never yield to the four sages. You can think that I don't know what's good for me or that I'm hopeless. Not only will I not yield to them, but I will also not yield to this world. Those who are willing to believe me, stand by my side. I can take you out, but at the same time, it's tantamount to becoming the enemy of the four sages. They may come at any time, so you only have 3 breaths to think about it. 1. Several people were a little moved, but they were also very conflicted. If they submitted to the four sages, they could live for a while, but what about later? The four sages wanted to sacrifice the falling star continent to transcend the world. As the saying goes, when the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact. At that time, they would also have a slim chance of survival. Old Beggar Gu smiled. Good boy, good spirit. Old Beggar Gu will bet with you. King Dong Hai and Pure Yang's sacred master did not say anything and directly stood over. Sovereign Beast looked at the 10 sky demons and said, idiots, why didn't the four sages leave this place and return to the falling star continent after so many years? His words woke the 10 sky demons from their dreams. It was very likely that the four sages could not return to the falling star continent for the time being. Otherwise, why would they use them to set up a trap? He secretly sighed at his own stupidity. Shi Fangtian was not that stupid, but mainly because he was scared by the four sages. Tao ancestor Qingquan's fear of the four sages gradually dissipated. After so long, the four sages may not have much power left. If we don't fight, we will be slaughtered. We are not living beings. The two former Holy Spirit experts also chose to believe in Ling Shiqi. Tu Dang and Meng Tianzong naturally stood over. From the beginning to the end, they knew that Ling Shiqi could leave this place through the underworld at any time. Ling Shiqi said, "The situation is urgent, and there is no time to say more. Don't have any consciousness of resistance. Otherwise, don't blame me if an accident happens." Then, the underworld's door opened wide, and he brought the 8 people into the underworld in an instant. However, he did not expose the existence of the underworld. Instead, he brought them to fly in the dark clouds above the underworld and sealed the aura outside. He deliberately stayed in the underworld for a while before opening the underworld's door again and bringing them to the vicinity of the Western Wasteland King's mansion. Because the other members of the underworld were fighting, only Ozu did not participate. He was also a backup plan Ling Shiqi had prepared for himself. After everyone came out, Ling Shiqi opened his mouth and vomited blood. His face was as pale as paper, and he looked like he was seriously injured and his vitality was greatly damaged. Chapter 942. No one was suspicious of his actions. After all, he must have paid a great price to escape with so many people right under the nose of the 4 saints. None of them harbored any evil intentions at this moment. They were already in the same boat. At this moment, they only felt that Ling Shiqi was worthy of respect. The current Falling Star continent is divided into 3 empires. This is the Thunderblaze Empire's West Desolation County, which is also my fief. Currently, the Thunderblaze Empire and the Falling Star Empire are at war. Let's not delay. Let's take control of the 4 dragon veins that Saint Luoying mentioned. Leave the Thunderblaze Empire to me. Ling Shiqi used the shortest words to explain the situation of the continent. At the same time, he also told them what to do immediately. The king of the East Sea nodded and said, "I'll go find the dragon vein in the East Sea." The old beggar, Gru, scratched his head and muttered, "The 2 empires are at war? When did this happen?" Venerable Beast was shocked when he heard the Demon King's words. "What's going on?" "The demons have left the northern wastelands." "That's right. If I'm not mistaken, the demons should have already contributed to the Northern Wei Empire." "Venerable Beast, let's go there and take a look." Venerable Beast's eyes narrowed. "How did you know?" "Everyone was trapped in the space tunnel." "How did Ling Shiqi know everything?" Ling Shiqi didn't hide anything. He smiled and said, "It's rare for the sacred city to appear. We have to make good use of such a good opportunity." He didn't say it clearly, but everyone immediately understood everything. It turned out that Ling Shiqi had already planned everything before they entered the sacred city. What was his purpose? The demons had taken down the Northern Wei Empire. Now, the Thunderblaze Empire and the Falling Star Empire were at war. The Thunderblaze Empire had Ling Shiqi, a Heaven Ascension realm expert, so the outcome was already decided. In this way, the whole world seemed to belong to him. All the dragon veins were naturally in his hands. No wonder he wasn't willing to submit to the 4 saints. He had long regarded the Falling Star continent as his own. They didn't have much to say. They weren't interested in ruling the world or unifying the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hidden themselves. However, the 4 sages' request reminded them of the importance of the dragon vein. Speaking of which, Ling Shiqi had to thank the 4 sages for giving him the location of the 4 dragon veins in the Starfall continent. 3 of them were in the imperial capitals of the 3 empires. Ling Shiqi had only just found out that there was a dragon vein at the end of the East Sea. Moreover, he reckoned that the 4 sages wanted to obtain these 4 dragon veins for the same reason as him. It was all for the power of providence. In the memories of the Master of Samsara, before his last reincarnation, he finally comprehended that there was still a kind of power that could compete with the heavens. It was the power of providence. This wasn't some powerful force, it was even an illusory existence. However, the power of providence was highly valued by the dynasties of the Starfall continent. It was even seen as the foundation of the dynasty, and there were at least a few divine origin stage cultivators personally overseeing it. Leng Shiqi had also entered the dragon vein of the Thunderblaze dynasty. It was definitely a holy land for cultivation. However, compared to cultivation, the dragon vein's greater benefit was that it symbolized the dynasty's providence. There were countless people in every dynasty, and spirit cultivators were only a small part of them. If the dynasty was loyal, then all the people would be loyal. Those ordinary people's faith in the dynasty would be gathered in the dragon vein. The Starfall continent had existed for countless years. After so many years, the dragon vein had gathered a lot of faith. If he could obtain the dragon vein for his own use, it would be equivalent to having endless power of providence behind him. When Leng Shiqi could control all 4 dragon veins, then he would be the ruler of the Starfall continent and enjoy the power of faith of all the people. The 4 sages must also want to use the power of providence of the dragon vein to avoid part of the will of the world and find a way to transcend this world. Since Leng Shiqi knew everything, of course the dragon vein would be in his hands. The king of the East Sea and the beast sovereign immediately left. Leng Shiqi looked at the 10 sky demons and Tao ancestor Qinkuan. Since things have come to this, why don't you recuperate in my Western Desolation Palace for a while? If you need anything, just ask. That's good. When you recover, I still have something to ask of you. Tao ancestor Qinkuan agreed. However, the 10 sky demons said, forget about me. Back then, I also left some things for the younger generation. I don't know how those unfilial descendants are doing. I'll go look for them. After saying that, he turned into a wisp of demonic qi and disappeared without a trace. Leng Shiqi turned his head and said, this time, we came out early. The war between the 2 dynasties has just begun. Please make a trip to the Starfall dynasty, Master Tudong. There's no need for you to make a move. Just show your strength. If the Starfall dynasty is willing to surrender, there will be less killing. Palace Master Meng, Brother Gulu, Luha, Luo Ying, and Huang Wei of the 4 sages have all fallen, and more than half of the experts have gone to the holy city. We'll split up and attack these 3 spirit domains. We don't need to kill people, but we need to do our best to plunder all the things left behind by the 4 sages. Even if we don't find anything, we have to raise the various spirit domains to the ground. The 4 sages might return to the Starfall continent at any time. Perhaps some of their methods were left behind in the 4 sages' spirit domains. Since the 2 sides had become mortal enemies, they had to cut off all the chances of the other side. Following that, Meng Tianzong went to the Luo Ying spirit domain, while Gulu went to the Huang Wei spirit domain. Leng Shiqi naturally went to the 6 directions spirit domain. That 6 directions spirit sovereign had caused a lot of trouble. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to endure, Leng Shiqi would have razed the 6 directions spirit domain to the ground long ago. Very quickly, 3 of the 4 sages' spirit domains were completely destroyed by a mysterious super expert. The entire Starfall continent fell into endless chaos, as if there were flames of war everywhere. And the flames of war had already spread to the Lingbei County. On this day, the places where a large number of spirit cultivators had gathered received a piece of news. The Thunderfire dynasty had joined forces with the West continent to attack the Starfall dynasty. There was no declaration of war, no reason to send out troops, just like that. The border of the Starfall dynasty only had a few 100,000 guards. In less than half a day, the stronghold was broken through. The army of over 500,000 charged straight into the capital of the Starfall dynasty. Hearing this news, everyone felt that it was inconceivable. Where did the Thunderfire dynasty get the confidence to fight with the Starfall dynasty? What was terrifying was that not only did this happen, the Thunderfire dynasty even broke through several cities along the way and was about to reach the capital. Bang! The Starfall dynasty's emperor, Inkongji, smashed the dragon table with a slap and roared in shock and anger, "How is this possible? Where did the 550,000 army come from? Lei Haoyan dared to give up the north. Is he not afraid of the Northern Wei dynasty's sneak attack? The officials below were trembling in fear. It was also at this time that a messenger ran in from outside the palace in a panic. Your Majesty, countless demonic beasts in the northern wastelands have already attacked the Northern Wei dynasty. Chapter 943. Inkongji was incomparably shocked. The demonic beasts had been hiding in the northern wastelands for tens of thousands of years. It had been too long, and the people had long gotten used to the demonic beasts being weak. Even though they had never let down their guard against the demonic beasts, they still believed that the demonic beasts would not dare to invade the continent. The demonic beasts only had 2 8th-ranked demon venerables, while the humans had more than a dozen mystic comprehending experts. Unless the demonic beasts were seeking their own destruction, they would not dare to rebel. But the demonic beasts had really charged out of the northern wastelands when the holy city opened. It was useless to think too much now. Inkongji still had to face the 500,000-strong army of the Thunderfire dynasty. How could he have the time to care about the Northern Wei dynasty? But since the Northern Wei dynasty had already been conquered by the demonic beasts, it was impossible to use the Northern Wei dynasty to restrain the Thunderfire dynasty. Something's not right. From the fact that the Thunderfire dynasty had completely abandoned the northern defensive line, it seemed that they had long known that something would happen to the Northern Wei dynasty. Could it be that the Thunderfire dynasty was secretly behind the demonic beast's invasion? Also, the timing was too good. When the holy city opened, most of the experts of the Northern Wei dynasty were not present. It was impossible for them to defend against the demonic beasts by relying on their combat troops. Furthermore, even if those experts could defeat the demonic beasts after leaving the holy city, the dead would not be revived. The lost cities and countless resources would not be regenerated. The Northern Wei dynasty was basically destroyed. Also, the 550,000-strong army of the Thunderfire dynasty was not something that could be gathered overnight. In other words, the Thunderfire dynasty had been planning all of this for a long time. They should have known that the holy city was about to open. Facing the powerful Thunderfire dynasty, Inkongji did not have the confidence to win. Even though the Starfall dynasty had deep foundations, they had already lost over 100,000 soldiers and a large number of cities due to being caught off guard. It would take time for them to gather their forces from other places. It was impossible to stop the Thunderfire dynasty. The only way now was to give up on the eastern provinces and gather all their forces to build a solid defensive line. Only then would they have a chance. Just as Inkongji was pondering, someone came to reporting to Your Majesty, the Northern Wei dynasty's Emperor Wei Xian and a large number of experts wish to see Your Majesty. Inkongji's eyes flashed with joy. If there were any remaining experts of the Northern Wei dynasty, then he would have a higher chance of victory. Quick, invite him in. Wei Xuandi walked into the main hall with 2 Tianyuan cultivators. The rest of the cultivators were waiting outside, so he could not bring all of them in. Just as the 2 of them were about to exchange a few pleasantries, a series of battle reports came in from outside. Reporting. The Heaven's Pivot Army was ambushed by a large number of unknown experts and suffered heavy losses. All the commanders and generals were killed, and a large number of soldiers defected. Reporting, the Migres military force was ambushed by a large number of unknown experts and suffered heavy losses. The commanders and generals were all killed, and a large number of soldiers defected. Report, as the continuous reports of defeats came in, Inkongji's body trembled. All the combat armies were being ambushed. How was he going to form a defensive line to fight the Thunderblaze dynasty? Pooh! Inkongji was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Your Majesty! The group of people immediately panicked. Wei Xuandi was also a little dumbfounded. He had finally made up his mind to abandon the Northern Wei Empire and join the Starfall Empire. However, he did not expect the Thunderfire Empire to attack the Starfall Empire and pose such a huge threat to them. However, he also understood that the Thunderblaze Empire was too powerful and had obviously planned this for a long time. Right now, the only solution was to work together. He hesitated and said, "Do we really have a chance?" "Yes." Ji suddenly erupted with a terrifying chill and hatred. Since the Thunderblaze Empire has sent out a large number of experts to ambush the various combat armies, why can't we directly attack the Thunderblaze Empire's main camp? Our empire still has many Heaven Origin Realm experts under us. If we work together, we should be able to gather around 40 of them. With this force, we can forcefully attack the Thunderblaze Empire's main camp. Thunderblaze Empire's Lei Haoyan is personally leading the expedition. When the Saint City opens, our Mystic Comprehending Realm experts are not around. He also doesn't have any Mystic Comprehending Realm experts protecting him. We can directly take his head. Also, 90% of the world's experts are gathered in the Lingbei County. As long as we can persuade them to take action, we still have a chance to defeat the Thunderblaze Empire. Buzz, however, all of a sudden, the boundless Buddha's light dyed the sky golden. Then, the dense Buddha's light condensed into a huge swastika seal, enveloping the entire imperial capital of the Starfall dynasty within it. Tu Deng floated in the air as if a god had descended. The entire imperial capital turned pale with fright, especially those Heaven Origin Realm experts. They didn't even have the courage to attack Tu Deng. Under that heavenly might, they were no different from ants. Who is he? This is too terrifying. What realm is he at? Mystic Comprehending Realm experts are far from being this strong. Could it be Mystic Comprehending Realm? Tu Deng said, "West Continent's Tu Deng is here to pay a visit." He's from the West Continent? Right now, the West Continent and the Thunderblaze Empire had joined forces to attack the Starfall Empire. In other words, this super expert was their enemy. Amitabha. Surrender to prevent the people from being plunged into misery and suffering. Ji's expression was stupefied as if he was already in a daze. Only now did he understand that he was destined to lose this so-called war from the beginning. This was a war without any suspense. Mystic Comprehending Realm expert. This world actually had a Mystic Comprehending Realm expert. And he was standing on the opposite side of the Starfall Empire. Ji laughed bitterly. The heavens are going to destroy my Starfall Empire. Just now, he was still prepared to fight to the death. But now, he realized that even if they fought to the death, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The ruler of a fallen empire. The ruler of a fallen empire. Ji laughed like a madman. He staggered out of the grand hall and slapped his own forehead in front of everyone. He committed suicide. Following Ji's death, the Starfall Empire that had dominated the Starfall continent for tens of thousands of years was going to be destroyed. Many people who hadn't been affected by the war felt that it was ridiculous. Their Starfall Empire was destroyed just like that, and they had become part of the Thunderblaze Empire. Soon, the Thunderblaze Empire's army rushed into the imperial capital. They didn't massacre any cities because they were already part of the Thunderblaze Empire's territory. Lei Haoyan smoothly took over everything in the Starfall Empire. The bloody battle that they had imagined didn't happen at all. The dignified Starfall Empire was destroyed by the Thunderblaze Empire just like that. This was something that no one had expected. On the other side, after the demon race conquered the Northern Wei Empire, the shocking thing was that the demon race didn't kill too many ordinary people. Instead, there were people who specially brought them to the Thunderblaze Empire. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that this was clearly a deal between the Thunderblaze Empire and the demon race. The demon race obtained a large piece of fertile land, while the Thunderblaze Empire obtained the world. Everyone knew that the Thunderblaze Empire's emperor, Lei Haoyan, had become the ruler of the world. But very few people knew who the true ruler of the world was. Ling Shiqi. Chapter 944. And the vast number of spirit cultivators in Lingbei County did not know what was going on. Every day, there would be news that would shock the world, such as the appearance of the Monster Clan, the destruction of the Northern Wei dynasty, the invasion of the Thunderstorm dynasty, the annihilation of the Three Realms, and so on. One by one, the news shattered their hearts. These people couldn't enter the holy city. They were only here to watch the show. But in the time it took them to watch the show, the world had changed hands. Of course, there were also cultivators from the Northern Wei dynasty, the Starfall dynasty, and the Three Realms who immediately rushed back, but they were all intercepted by mysterious experts on their way back. The only survivor was the extreme martial spirit region. The hundreds of experts in the Holy City's secret realm didn't know that the outside world had been turned upside down. There was still a fierce battle going on. A total of 7 to 5 Tongxian realm experts were fighting. Wuma Yuanjia, Chen Xian, and 2 unfamiliar experts were attacking 3 Tongxian realm experts together. The 3 were Old Man Xiao, Hateful Blade, and Yu Ju Lin. The most powerful of the 3 was Yu Ju Lin. His strange and unpredictable shadow secret technique was impossible to guard against. He suppressed Wuma Yuanjia and Chen Xian with his own strength and forced them to retreat. The 2 of them didn't understand why the Nether Temple would stand on the side of the Thunderstorm dynasty. Hateful Blade and Old Man Xiao were fighting with the 2 unfamiliar Tongxian realm experts. The 2 of them seemed to have just entered the Tongxian realm. They had just broken through in recent years and kept it a secret. When the 7 of them were fighting fiercely, Hateful Blade suddenly stopped. A gust of netherworld qi rose around him, and Leng Shiqi, wearing the mask of the Emperor of Fengdu, walked out. He raised his hand, and in an instant, the sky darkened. Endless netherworld qi suddenly formed 6 huge whirlpools that covered the sky. The terrifying reincarnation power almost burst the secret realm. The 6 Paths Will was like a huge millstone that stirred up the world. All the laws were shattered. Wuma Yuanjia and Chen Xian were shocked. Another Tongxian realm expert? Under the 6 Paths Will, 4 Tongxian realm experts were crushed into powder before they could do anything. Leng Shiqi muttered to himself, only one more. Old Master Qiao was stunned. What was going on? Leng Shiqi didn't have time to say more. Great changes are about to happen in the sacred city. Let's go out first. Then, he brought Old Man Xiao and the others, as well as the Heaven Origin Realm cultivators of the Thunderblaze dynasty, and left the Saint City's secret realm. It was also at this moment that the 4 saints finally stabilized the array. Then, their expressions froze. Only then did they realize that Leng Shiqi and the others had disappeared. How is this possible? How did they escape? There are no traces at all. This is too strange. Even the law of space can't do that. The 4 of them were furious. Leng Shiqi and the others were their last hope to take the final step, but this hope had disappeared. Moreover, he had disappeared right under their noses. Even if Leng Shiqi and the others had some secret techniques or treasures, it was impossible for them to leave this place without alerting them. Otherwise, the 10 Sky Fiends would not have died here. Unless they had the power to surpass the 4 saints. However, they knew that it was impossible. Saint Sovereign Luo Ying clenched her teeth. We should have planted a restriction in their bodies long ago. We planned to plant a restriction in them silently when we sent them out. Who would have thought that the whirlpool would suddenly change? Saint Sovereign 6 Unity sighed. What should we do now? After they leave, no one will come in again. Then we can only go out personally. Saint Sovereign Huang Wei said solemnly. No. The other 3 objected firmly at the same time. Saint Sovereign Wuji said in a low voice, even if you have a suitable physical body, you will be severely injured by the means left behind by the Star Tribe if you force your way out. Not only will you lose a large amount of saint power for nothing, but you might not be able to suppress those who escaped easily with your weakened power. Other than this, there's no other way. As long as you lend me some saint power, I can still set everything up. When Saint Sovereign Huang Wei said that, the other 3 fell silent. Saint Sovereign 6 Unity was the first to break the silence. He directly sent a stream of saint power to Saint Sovereign Huang Wei. Everything depends on you. In the outside world, the world had already belonged to Leng Shiqi. At that moment, he was in the Thunderblaze dynasty's Dragon Vein. This was his second time entering the Dragon Vein, but the feeling was completely different. This time, he stretched out his hand, and a mini dragon vein floated into his hand. Leng Shiqi didn't hesitate at all and directly swallowed it. This action also meant that the dragon vein here would no longer exist, and he would become a walking dragon vein. This might affect the Thunderblaze dynasty's luck, but the four saints had their eyes on the dragon vein as well. He had to take it away in advance. He could not let the dragon vein fall into the hands of the four saints. Moreover, since the dragon vein was valued by the four saints, it might have some special effects that Leng Shiqi did not know about. Then, he swallowed the dragon veins of the Starfall dynasty and the Northern Wei dynasty, and finally came to the East Sea. This was his first time in the East Sea. 10 years ago, he had borrowed the power of the East Sea spirit cultivators to unify the world. However, with the increase of his strength and the existence of Tu Deng and Meng Tianzong, the power of the East Sea seemed to be irrelevant. The dragon vein of the East Sea had been found by King Dong Hai. As soon as Leng Shiqi entered the East Sea, King Dong Hai walked towards him. The two of them nodded to each other as a greeting, and then flew straight to the end of the East Sea. The end of the East Sea was a chaotic fog, and there was a spatial turbulence in it. King Dong Hai said, "I used to think that the opposite side was another sea, but I didn't expect it to be the end of our space. The dragon vein is here. Fortunately, it's not too far away. Otherwise, even you and I might not be able to come out alive." Leng Shiqi followed King Dong Hai into the chaotic fog. The two of them tried their best to resist the spatial turbulence that could appear at any time. Not long after, they finally found the last dragon vein. The dragon vein of the East Sea was slightly different from the other three. It was obviously much purer. Perhaps no one had obtained it for countless years. Leng Shiqi swallowed it in one gulp, and all the dragon veins in the world gathered in his body. Suddenly, a strange power poured into his sea of consciousness. It didn't have any power, but it made his perception of heaven and earth clearer. This was the power of faith that was born after all the luck in the world returned to him. Leng Shiqi didn't want to be recognized by the will of heaven and earth. Now, he had been recognized by all living beings in the Starfall continent. The power of faith, perhaps Leng Shiqi was the first person to obtain this power. After all, even the four saints, even the people who had once unified the world, could not swallow the dragon vein. It was just that Leng Shiqi had not discovered the specific use of the power of faith, but before that, he had something more important to do. That was to upgrade the underworld. Chapter 945. The conditions for upgrading the Mansion of the Dead had basically been fulfilled. Leng Shiqi had stirred up the world's disputes with great fanfare in order to collect a large number of souls and turn them into merit. The Northern Wei dynasty had been invaded by the demon race, and the Thunderstorm dynasty had attacked the Starfall dynasty. He had already collected enough merit, so he had tried his best to prevent unnecessary casualties. Now, the Mansion of the Dead was only one step away from upgrading, and that was the head of a Tongxian realm expert. Leng Shiqi had first killed 6 Directions Spirit Sovereign and the other 3 in the Holy City. When the door was about to open, he killed Yi Mei. Then, he entered the Holy City's secret realm and killed Wuma Yuanjie, Chen Xian, and the 2 Tongxian realm experts who had helped them. A total of 9 people. Now, he was only short of 1 head. There were very few Tongxian realm experts in the world, and there were actually more Tongxian realm experts than Tongxian realm experts. It was a strange sight. Leng Shiqi already had a target for this last head. The only surviving martial spirit region of the 4 saint spirit regions. Not long after Leng Shiqi had brought out the people in the Holy City's secret realm, the secret realm had inexplicably collapsed, and more than half of the people inside had died. Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji had been in the secret realm at that time, but Leng Shiqi did not dare to stay for too long in fear of being discovered by the 4 saints, so he did not specifically kill him. However, the monk could escape, but the temple could not. After Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji left the secret realm, he found out that he was the only one left of the 4 saint spirit regions. This successor of the 4 saints, the master of the spirit region, was greatly frightened. Since someone could easily destroy the other 3 spirit regions, destroying the martial spirit region would naturally be as easy as flipping a hand. Therefore, Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji had moved the resources and disciples of the spirit region as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, just as they had finished preparing, a person had already appeared in the sky above the spirit region. The cold netherworld energy instantly covered the martial spirit region, and some low-level spirit cultivators even died upon contact. Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji knew that this day had come. Without any suspense, Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji's head fell into Leng Shiqi's hands, and his soul was also absorbed into the mansion of the dead. The souls of 10 Tongxian realm experts had finally been gathered. Leng Shiqi entered the mansion of the dead and summoned the territory system. Mansion of the Dead has met the upgrade requirements. Upgrading the territory will require 2,000 natural days. During this period, the territory will not be able to be used. Do you wish to upgrade? Yes. The Leng Shiqi was prepared to welcome the great changes in Underworld, but strangely, Underworld did not expand this time, and there were no great changes. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he looked towards the sky above the Underworld. With a single thought, he arrived directly above the Underworld's 9 heavens. Unknowingly, a fist-sized mass of black energy had appeared here. 4 words suddenly appeared in Leng Shiqi's mind: world origin. The Underworld actually gave birth to the world's origin. This meant that from this moment onwards, the Underworld had truly become a world of its own. The Underworld. As for the Leng Shiqi, as long as he refines the world's origin, he can become the master of the world. He had always been the founder of Underworld, and also held the title of Lord of Underworld. In Underworld, he had many special abilities. However, compared to the world's origin, the difference was like heaven and earth. Leng Shiqi gently hooked his finger, and the Underworld's origin directly entered his body. At this moment, all the living beings in Underworld knelt on the ground devoutly at the same time. They kowtowed 3 times and 9 times in the direction of Leng Shiqi, welcoming the arrival of their master of the world. What a strange feeling. Leng Shiqi clenched his hands. He seemed to be able to decide the life and death of any living being with just a thought. Just a glance was enough to shatter the void. Then, he flicked his 5 fingers, and 5 rays of light scattered in all directions. In fact, those were not rays of light, but threads of law. Threads of law of the power of the 5 elements. Leng Shiqi flashed to the side of an ancient tree. With a gentle wave, the ancient tree grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally withered and decayed. Every year, the law of time. After he became the master of the Underworld, the 3 supreme laws and the 5 elements laws of yin and yang were all at his fingertips. This godlike feeling was intoxicating. However, Leng Shiqi did not lose himself in it. He knew very well that no matter how powerful he was in Underworld, he could not bring all of it to the middle element world. After all, these were 2 different worlds. The power of law was completely different. Not only did he want to become the master of Underworld, he also wanted to break free from the shackles of the middle element world and strive for supreme power. Although Leng Shiqi could choose to be the master of his world in Underworld, Underworld was the system's masterpiece. In the end, all of Underworld's functions and powers were still dependent on the system. He had decided to be wary of the system a long time ago. All these years, he had been anxious to upgrade Underworld, not because he was greedy for the so-called master of the world. Instead, he wanted to use Underworld's power to fight against the middle element world, and even transcend this world like the 4 sages pursued. When that time came, Underworld or the middle element world would no longer matter. After Underworld's upgrade this time, there were no conditions for a second upgrade. This was because Underworld had been upgraded to its limit. Although Leng Shiqi could not bring all of his power to the middle element world, he could still use some of it. He had returned to the Starfall continent. He could easily use all of the laws of heaven and earth in this world. Of course, they were not as powerful as they were in Underworld. Even so, it had indirectly increased his strength, and not just by a little bit. This gave him more confidence in fighting against the 4 sages in the future. However, What Ling Shiqi did not know was that just as he was beginning to adapt to the power of the two worlds, a mysterious figure had arrived in Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region. He looked at Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region, which had been razed to the ground and turned into ruins. His whole body was burning with anger. He was the Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region Lord, who had paid a great price to walk out of the spatial passage. After returning to the Starfall continent, he came here immediately because he had left many things in Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region. If he could take them back, they could help him quickly recover his strength. However, what he saw was the scene in front of him. The Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region that he had built with his own hands, which had been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years, was destroyed. Not only was it destroyed, but it was completely destroyed. All of the disciples were dead. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, they were all being hunted down by the Blood Garment Pavilion's assassins. Moreover, Ling Shiqi had specifically ordered that no traces of the spiritual region could be left behind. Even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground, they had to destroy everything. Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region Lord formed a hand seal, and the spiritual region suddenly displayed a realistic scene. It was the scene of the spiritual region's destruction. He finally saw clearly that the one who had done it was the old beggar. "You're courting death." Chapter 946. In the Western Wilderness King's mansion, several reaching heaven states sat together with a heavy expression. Ling Shiqi said bluntly, "Everyone, I've absorbed 4 dragon veins of the falling star continent. Now I'm a walking dragon vein. Although I don't know how to use the power of the dragon veins, the 4 saints care so much about the dragon veins. When they return to the falling star continent, they will definitely come to snatch the dragon veins." Everyone knew that he had obtained all the dragon veins, but no one cared too much. Otherwise, they would have stood out to stop him from the beginning. What they cared more about was the second half of Ling Shiqi's sentence. The 4 saints would return to the falling star continent sooner or later. Because no one would enter the holy city, the 4 saints would not be able to find pawns to use. The only way was to come out personally. Thinking of this, everyone was a little worried, as if there was a sharp sword hanging over their heads all the time. They did not know when it would fall and take their lives. Ling Shiqi continued, "I dare say that the 4 saints will have to pay a great price to leave that space, and the explosion of the vortex last time will consume a lot of their power. So don't worry too much. Even if the 4 saints reappear, their strength will be far less than now. We still have the power to fight them. It's not that easy." Gru shook his head. Heaven and Earth Tao Ancestor also said, "The 4 saints have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. No one knows what trump cards they have. Even if their strength is severely weakened, they are not something we can deal with. What you said is reasonable." Ling Shiqi stood up and said, "So we must improve our strength as soon as possible." They immediately sighed in tacit understanding. Gru said, "It's not that easy. I've been in the reaching heaven state for thousands of years. There's no possibility for me to improve." The 10 sky demons snorted. "It's only been thousands of years. Heaven and Earth Tao Ancestor and I didn't make any progress for more than 20,000 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't have entered the holy city so easily." Ling Shiqi smiled mysteriously. "If I say that I have a way to improve your strength in a short time, would you believe me?" The 10 sky demons subconsciously wanted to say that they didn't believe it, but they immediately remembered that Ling Shiqi had said something similar in the passage. At that time, Ling Shiqi said that he could take them out, and in the end, he really did leave without the 4 saints knowing. Now that he had said something like this, even the 10-directional holy devil couldn't help but hesitate. Could it be that Ling Shiqi really had a way? To tell you the truth, I have a mysterious secret realm in my hands. There's an extremely powerful inheritance in it. It's very useful even for reaching heaven states and holy spirits. That secret realm is called the underworld. Ling Shiqi briefly explained the existence of the underworld. He also told them that they had relied on the underworld to escape from the 4 saints. "I'm here to invite everyone to join the underworld. However, since you've received something, you'll naturally have to give something in return. Once one joined Underworld, it was impossible for them to betray Underworld. Otherwise, they would be hunted down by all of Underworld's members. Oh right, I forgot to introduce him to everyone. As Leng Shiqi spoke, he pointed at Meng Tianzong. This is not only the palace lord of the Divine Dream Palace 10,000 years ago, but also Mengpo of the Underworld. This is the state preceptor of the West State Country, and also the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the Underworld. Only then did everyone realize that Tu Deng and Meng Tianzong had been working together with Leng Shiqi all this time. Meng Tianzong smiled. You must have suspected how I appeared in the passageway before. In fact, the Underworld has the ability to connect to space. As long as you join the Underworld, even if the four saints come in person, we'll still have the confidence to escape. She had helped Leng Shiqi add a stab. If they joined the Underworld, they would be in an invincible position. If they didn't join, then they would have to bear the wrath of the four saints. They were all considering it. They each had their own thoughts, and Leng Shiqi didn't force them. In the end, the old beggar, Gru, was the first to agree. With someone taking the lead, everyone else agreed first. Leng Shiqi laughed and waved his hand to bring everyone into the Underworld. Then, a series of imperial titles resounded through the world. The Boundless Ghost Emperor of the South Pole, Dao Ancestor Qinkuan. The Devil Emperor of the West Pole, Holy Demon of the 10 Directions. Emperor Song, King of the East Sea. King of Mount Tai, Gru. What surprised Leng Shiqi the most was that the Beast Venerable had actually obtained Daiding's inheritance. He had always thought that Daiding was the mount of the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, but he didn't expect that Daiding was also one of the inheritances of the Underworld. At this moment, the 5 Ghost Emperors and the 10 Yama Kings had all gathered. It was truly an unprecedented time for the Underworld. Damn! They were still accepting the inheritance when the Dharma body of the Luan form king appeared in the distance, but these 2 words appeared. Leng Shiqi knew Ozu's personality. If it wasn't for something major, he wouldn't have lost his composure like this. He must have deduced something extraordinary. Ever since Leng Shiqi left the holy city, he had asked Ozu to find ways to deduce the 4 saints. Even if he could only deduce a little, it would be good. For so long, Ozu had been trying, but he couldn't deduce anything. Instead, he suffered backlash time and time again. Later on, he learned to be smart. He no longer deduced the 4 saints at once, but one by one. Just now, when he was deducing Huangwei Holy Sage, he finally had an idea. But it gave him a big fright. Leng Shiqi asked, "What did you deduce?" Ozu's expression was a little flustered. "Guess what? Huangwei Holy Sage of the 4 saints is already here." "What did you say?" Hearing this, Leng Shiqi was also shocked. Not long ago, he said that the 4 saints would come out sooner or later, but he didn't expect them to come so soon. Leng Shiqi quickly calmed down. "Tell me clearly, are the 4 saints all here, or is it just Huangwei Holy Sage?" "I can't deduce the other 3 saints at all. I can only deduce Huangwei Holy Sage." "He will find this place in the near future," Ozu replied. Leng Shiqi quietly heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, not all 4 of them came out, but only Huangwei Holy Sage. Just as he had said to everyone before, the 4 saints would definitely have to pay a high price to leave that space. Now that only Huangwei Holy Sage had come out, it proved this point. If he could come out so easily, then he wouldn't be the only one. You might be able to deduce the exact time. This. Ozu revealed a troubled expression. "The difference in strength between us is too great, I'm afraid." However, before Ozu could finish his sentence, Leng Shiqi pressed his palm on his shoulder, and then a trace of the Underworld's origin energy entered his body. Suddenly, Ozu's Will King Dharma idol grew rapidly, and his cultivation broke through to the Tongxian realm. What about now? Leng Shiqi retracted his origin energy and said slowly. Ozu's jaw was about to drop. What was going on? He broke through with a casual pat. Was he still human? Chapter 947. Oziu swallowed his saliva. Even though Leng Shiqi had given him too many shocks, he still couldn't help but feel incomparably shocked. After a short while, he finally reacted and said, "Although there's still a big gap between me and the Huangwei Holy Sovereign, with the support of the underworld's power, I should be able to calculate a more specific time. I'll tell you later." Not long after, Oziu, who looked exhausted, returned. He said weakly, In about 5 days, Huangwei Holy Sage will come looking for me." 5 days. Leng Shiqi looked at the few people who were still in the inheritance. Within 5 days, they would definitely finish accepting the inheritance, and everyone's overall strength would increase by a huge leap. His mind spun rapidly as he gradually came up with a plan that could possibly kill Huangwei Saint Venerable. 5 days seemed to be very short, but Leng Shiqi had a way to make it very long. He waved his hand lightly, and the origin energy exploded, turning into a gray light that enveloped the few people who were receiving the inheritance. And in this area, the flow of time suddenly slowed down. A breath of time outside was 100 breaths of time inside. Leng Shiqi had slowed down the flow of time by 100 times. In the underworld, he was a god, and changing the flow of time was easy. Therefore, although Huangwei Holy Sage would only be here in 5 days, Leng Shiqi and the others had more than a year to prepare. Leng Shiqi created a clone and sat cross-legged. He also needed time to comprehend more of the power of law and create the most suitable spirit skill for himself. His clone went out to disperse the people of the Western Wasteland King's mansion, and told the spirit cultivators and ordinary people within a radius of 10,000 miles to move away as soon as possible, so as to avoid any unexpected disasters. 5 days later, Huangwei Holy Sage appeared in the sky above the Western Wasteland King's mansion. His purpose here was to kill Gulu, who had destroyed his Huangwei spirit region. It was actually very easy for Huangwei Holy Sage to find Gulu's location, and he could also find this place in an extremely short period of time. However, he did not immediately come over because he also needed to recover a certain amount of strength. His saint power was greatly depleted when he came out of the passageway. Originally, he wanted to use the things left behind by the Royal Prestige spiritual region, but unfortunately, the spiritual region was destroyed. He had no choice but to search for some of the resources that had been left behind in the past. However, after hundreds of thousands of years, they had long been taken away by generations of people as opportunities. Huangwei Saint Venerable finally recovered some of his strength and charged into the West Baron King Manor. However, when he arrived, he discovered that there was almost no one within a radius of 10,000 miles. Even in a king's mansion, there was only one person. That person was Leng Shiqi. "It's you." Huangwei Holy Sage naturally recognized Leng Shiqi as one of the people from back then. "The Royal Majesty Holy Lord is here in person." "I am terrified." Leng Shiqi said the word terrified, but there was a smile on his face. Huangwei Saintly Venerate's expression turned cold. Immediately, the world darkened and there seemed to be thunder roaring. "I gave you a way to live, but you didn't want to choose a way to die." Leng Shiqi sneered. "What way to live? What way to die? I only know that if I'm in the hands of you 4 so-called human saints, I'll die without a burial place. Since I'm here in person, you're all useless trash. It's a good time to get rid of you rats." Huangwei Saintly Venerable began to exude killing intent. Leng Shiqi tilted his head and extended a finger. Huangwei Saintly Venerable's eyes were filled with killing intent. He clenched his hand and a heavy saint sword appeared. It was named after himself, Huangwei Saint Sword. The real Huangwei Saint Sword. He had only left behind a replica saint sword for his descendants. Although it was also a saint weapon, his sword had been nurtured for hundreds of thousands of years. It had long surpassed the category of a saint weapon. The Royal Might's sacred sword fell. This sword seemed ordinary, but it had already abandoned all sword moves and returned to its original state. It was only until the moment the sword fell that it exploded with a powerful might that was enough to split mountains and break rivers. His sword move, engulfing mountains and rivers, was incomparably majestic. It was also an extremely domineering sword move. That kind of domineering was unlike Xiahou Ba's wild and unrestrained style, but it was the domineering aura of an emperor who ruled over the world. It was as if under this sword, both gods and ghosts would be torn apart. The sharp aura from the saint's sword made Leng Shiqi feel pain all over his body. Hellish flames rose around him. At the same time, his body completely disappeared. The saint's sword fell and created a large vacuum in the hellish flames. However, Huang Wei's saintly venerable felt that he did not hit Leng Shiqi at all. He scanned with his divine sense and tried his best to sense. However, Leng Shiqi's body had really disappeared. Only the hellish flames proved that Leng Shiqi was still here, turning into 10,000 flames. This is something that only a saint spirit expert who has comprehended the law of fire to the extreme can do. However, even a saint spirit expert cannot stop me. Huang Wei saintly venerable raised his saint sword. Saint light shot into the sky. A 10,000 feet long saint dragon appeared behind him. It was very lifelike. The dragon's roar was filled with endless saint aura and killing intent. The strange thing was that the sacred dragon's eyes were emitting a dense blood-red color. As he slashed out with his sword, it was as if all laws had been extinguished. The netherworld flames were all extinguished, and Leng Shiqi's figure was also forced out in a sorry state. He suddenly swung his sword. The void cracked. The sword transformed into the three realms of gods, demons, and Buddhas. What was different from before was that the three different sword techniques actually split the world. Leng Shiqi had also integrated the law of space into the three realms. The power of the three realms suppressed the saint dragon. The sword technique slashed the body, heart, and soul. The strange sword technique clashed head-on with Huang Wei's saintly venerable saint sword. Within 1,000 miles, the space was cracked. The powerful sword and saber chi were exploding. Even Sky Origin stage cultivators would be torn into pieces if they got too close to the fight. During the fight, Leng Shiqi flipped his left hand. A shocking sword intent surged out. The Emperor of Fengdu's Dharma form appeared behind him. As the sword slashed down, all the powers in the world were melted away. The sword of reincarnation slashed at the Saint Dragon. The power of reincarnation exploded and instantly cut off a part of the Saint Dragon's body. This caused Huang Wei's saintly venerable's sword intent to weaken. Boom! After a loud explosion, the void cracked. Leng Shiqi and Huang Wei's saintly venerable both retreated. Huang Wei's saintly venerable retreated a few feet. However, Leng Shiqi flew a few hundred feet away. He had to use 2 moves to barely block Huang Wei's saintly venerable's sword. He was even forced to retreat so far. Leng Shiqi had lost the fight. However, Huang Wei's saintly venerable's face darkened. Although his saint power was greatly damaged, he could only maintain his saint spirit realm. However, his accumulation over hundreds of thousands of years was unparalleled. Even if he were to fight a saint spirit expert in his peak state, he would not be at a disadvantage. However, he could not hurt Leng Shiqi even after using 2 moves. Chapter 948. What surprised him even more was that not only did Leng Shiqi cultivate the law of fire, but he also cultivated the law of space and the law of reincarnation. Huang Wei's saintly sage had come to kill Gru, but instead of Gru, he found Leng Shiqi. He had never seen Leng Shiqi in action before, so he did not know anything about Leng Shiqi. Of course, he did not bother to search for information about Leng Shiqi in advance. In his opinion, no one in the Falling Star continent was worthy of his effort. However, Leng Shiqi made him feel that it was a little tricky. Leng Shiqi was not a saint spirit elite, and he did not have any saint energy or saint soul. However, his comprehension of the law of fire had reached a terrifying level, far beyond the ascension realm. Huang Wei's saintly sage's strength had been greatly reduced, and he had many important things to do. If he wanted to kill Leng Shiqi, he would need to consume a large amount of saint energy, which made him hesitate. However, he quickly threw that hesitation to the back of his mind. If he could not kill a mere Leng Shiqi, he would be utterly humiliated. Suddenly, Huang Wei's saintly saint's body shone with red light. Red runes bloomed and covered his body like armor. Even the saintly dragon behind him was the same. Then, a glorious, majestic, and evil aura spread out. As the sword slashed down, the saint dragon roared. However, it was not an angry roar, but a mournful cry. Huang Wei's saintly sage's sword shattered heaven and earth, and the sword split the world. The terrifying sword intent was so real that it made people despair. Leng Shiqi closed his eyes. The next moment, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared behind him. With a thought, the 6 paths of reincarnation turned into 6 realms. Heaven realm, human realm, Shura realm, hungry ghost realm, animal realm, and hell realm. The power of the 6 realms rotated, and the power of the 6 realms exploded, causing the space to shatter and everything to be destroyed. Leng Shiqi merged the law of reincarnation and the law of space into one. It was a powerful spiritual technique created by combining the power of reincarnation and the power of space. World of 6 paths of reincarnation. When the two of them collided, the powerful force immediately exploded the void, even causing the entire space to tremble. It turned into a boundless origin chi storm that swept out for thousands of miles. This scene was simply like the end of the world. Just as the two of them were exchanging blows, several figures forcibly withstood the terrifying shockwaves and strangely appeared in the surroundings. These people were all dressed in luxurious black and gold robes and wore masks of various shapes and sizes. Their bodies surged with the aura of death. They were none other than the ghost emperors of the underworld and the Yama kings of the 10 palaces. The leaders were Tao ancestor Qian Kuan and the 10 sky demons, the strongest few. They did not appear to fight wholly venerate Huang Wei head-on. Instead, they formed seals with their hands. Boundless netherworld chi permeated the heaven and earth, and a heaven-reaching gate to the underworld was summoned by them. Immediately after, an extremely powerful suction force surged out from the gate of the underworld. It even formed many huge arms that wanted to pull Huang Wei's saintly sage in. Humph, how dare these losers and weaklings threaten me? Huang Wei's saintly sage sneered when he saw Tao ancestor Qian Kuan, Meng Tianzong, and the others suddenly appear. With a gentle wave of the sacred sword, all the arms were cut off. However, in this short moment, Leng Shiqi's body was covered with colorful threads. In the blink of an eye, those dazzling threads weaved into a huge net that covered the sky and slowly fell. Huang Wei's saintly sage could not help but be shocked when he saw this. He immediately stopped looking down on Leng Shiqi because every thread was a thread of law. The appearance of the net of law meant that Leng Shiqi had almost mastered all the laws of heaven and earth in the world. How was this possible? A sword chime sounded. Huang Wei's saintly sage swung the sacred sword in his hand. This sword tore through space and time, shattering the sky and earth. In just an instant, the net of law weaved by Leng Shiqi was broken in less than 2 breaths. Leng Shiqi did not care about the net of law at all. That was just a lie. Then, he forced his way into Huang Wei's saintly sage's sword realm. His body was immediately covered in blood and his meridians were all broken. His skin was burned by the sacred power, revealing his white bones. Even so, he did not care. His body suddenly flashed and he crossed space and grabbed Huang Wei's saintly sage. The suction force of the gate of the dead behind him grew stronger and countless gray hands extended out. Are you crazy? You're courting death. Huang Wei's saintly sage felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He swung his sacred sword and was about to kill Leng Shiqi. However, at this moment, Leng Shiqi's eyes were burning with blood-red flames. He started to burn his blood essence and even his divine soul. Immediately, the space between heaven and earth froze. An invisible power of law suddenly appeared. Huang Wei's saintly sage realized that the time around him seemed to have frozen. He could not even blink his eyes. It was to the extent that his thoughts were frozen at this moment. Time law, time stop. Swoosh. Using this opportunity, Huang Wei's saintly sage was dragged into the gate of the dead by Leng Shiqi. Huang Wei's saintly sage felt that he was being eroded by endless netherworld energy. He spread out his divine consciousness but realized that it stopped after spreading out for a few miles. Not only that, but the sacred power in his body was rapidly dissipating. He could not even sense the power of law. He was shocked. What is this place? Leng Shiqi transformed into the emperor of Fengdu and said coldly, "Welcome to my world." The 5 ghost emperors and the 10 kings of hell appeared. Waves of cold and terrifying netherworld energy surged and shrouded Huang Wei's saintly sage. At this moment, Huang Wei's saintly sage was shocked. The aura of these people who suddenly appeared in front of him was comparable to that of a sacred spirit expert. On the other hand, he could not sense any power of law at all. This caused the sacred power in his body to dissipate at an unbelievable speed. Most importantly, his physical body was not his own. It was stolen. In the blink of an eye, it turned into ashes. Only a weak sacred soul was left. Those towering Dharma idols stared at Huang Wei's saintly sage's sacred soul. Their eyes shone with a terrifying green light. They were like hungry wolves that saw prey that could not move. In just a few seconds, Huang Wei's saintly sage turned from a sacred spirit expert who had dominated the falling star continent for hundreds of thousands of years to a soul that could be slaughtered at any time. Just this change in mentality was hard for him to accept. However, he had no choice but to accept this reality. This is not the falling star continent, nor is it the middle realm. Who are you? Huang Wei's saintly sage realized that he had inexplicably walked to the edge of death. He exclaimed, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I know many secrets of heaven and earth. I know countless opportunities and countless cultivation techniques and spiritual techniques. You must still want to deal with 6 Unity saintly sage and the others. I can tell you their weaknesses. I'm still very useful." An absolute sage of the human race was actually begging for mercy. Chapter 949. Leng Shiqi transformed into the image of the emperor of Fengdu and exuded a murderous aura. The dignified Huang Wei heavenly venerate has such an attitude. How is he different from an ordinary person? Then, he opened his mouth and said, "Die." Huang Wei heavenly venerate's expression froze, and his saint soul dimmed. Leng Shiqi's words were law, and he easily took away Huang Wei heavenly venerate's life. A heavenly venerate had fallen just like that. Leng Shiqi kept Huang Wei heavenly venerate's saint soul. What Huang Wei heavenly venerate had said had tempted Leng Shiqi, but as long as he had Huang Wei heavenly venerate's saint soul in his hands, he would know everything. When the others saw Huang Wei heavenly venerate die just like that, they were in disbelief. Especially Tao ancestor Qian Kuan and 10 directional holy demon, who had almost died. They had fought with the 4 saints before, and they knew how terrifying they were. However, the insufferably arrogant Huang Wei heavenly venerate had died in front of them. Moreover, Huang Wei heavenly venerate's attitude before he died made everyone understand that heavenly venerate and absolute saint were no different from ordinary people in the face of death. The reverence in his heart had also disappeared. Leng Shiqi said, "The most difficult part of this battle is not fighting Huang Wei heavenly venerate head-on, but how to drag him into the mansion of hell. As you can see, in the mansion of hell, your strength is comparable to a Holy Spirit expert. However, if an outsider enters, he will lose all his strength like Huang Wei heavenly venerate, and he will be at our mercy. Therefore, the 4 saints have nothing to be afraid of. Even if Luoing heavenly venerate, 6 Unity heavenly venerate, and Martial Extremity heavenly venerate come at the same time, we still have a chance of winning." Killing Huang Wei holy venerate could be considered as a reassurance pill for everyone to eat. You have not fully comprehended the inheritance of the mansion of hell. Before the other 3 heavenly venerates appear, hurry up and increase your strength. The stronger we are, the more confident we will be. Everyone felt deeply moved, and they immediately dispersed to cultivate. Leng Shiqi took Huang Wei heavenly venerate's saint soul and walked into the Fengdu imperial palace. He first spent some time recuperating from his injuries. His injuries were actually very serious. If he had been in the outside world, he would have needed decades to recover. However, in the underworld, he had only needed a few hours to fully recover from his injuries. Taking out Huang Wei Holy Sovereign Saint's soul, Ling Shiqi tapped it lightly with his finger. Immediately, countless memories turned into images and scattered in all directions. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed as he quickly scanned through Huang Wei's memories. He finally found the secret of the four saints. In the passageway, most of the information that sacred sovereign Wu Ji had told them was true. However, there were two things that he had lied about. First of all, the four saints had actually been possessed long ago. They knew that the outside world was barren of spiritual energy, and had even been stripped of the recognition of the heavens and earth. When the first Holy Spirit Master entered that place, they were already possessed. They immediately killed that Holy Spirit Master and devoured all the Holy Spirit Master's Holy Spirit Master. There was another point. The main reason why the four saints did not return to the falling star continent was not to protect the human race, nor was it to seal the whirlpool. It was because the Star Tribe had tampered with that passageway. It was not that the Star Tribe did not guard against the human tribe, especially the passageway that concerned the entire tribe. They had set up a secret formation in the passageway. Everyone could enter, but other than those who had the bloodline of the Star Tribe, no one could leave. Unless one had the power to destroy all the arrays. Actually, with the four saints' strength, they stood a chance. Unfortunately, the Star Tribe's array was completely targeted at the human race. As long as they came into contact with the array, their Holy Spirit Master would be continuously absorbed. Not only would they lose their Holy Spirit Master, but they would also strengthen the array. Therefore, the four saints had been accumulating their Holy Spirit Master for a long time. They wanted to break through the array and even refine the falling star continent to transcend the middle element world. To refine the falling star continent, they did not only need to absorb all the spiritual energy on the continent, but also all the living creatures. They wanted to sacrifice all the living creatures on the continent to provide them with power. Ling Shiqi was right. The four saints wanted to destroy the falling star continent. Most importantly, Ling Shiqi knew that the four saints were not so united and harmonious. They had joined forces because they had the same goal. However, the spiritual energy on the falling star continent was not very abundant. Could it really support the four of them to transcend? If they were alone, the chances of success would be much higher. Therefore, the four saints had always been scheming against each other. It was just that they had never revealed it. This time, Huang Wei the Holy Sage came out alone for his own selfish reasons. The four saints had agreed that each of them would take one dragon's vein. His purpose was to monopolize all four dragons' veins. When he gathered the world's qi, the other three would not be able to do anything. Unfortunately, before he could find the dragon's veins, he had already fallen here. In addition, what shocked Ling Shiqi the most was that after hundreds of thousands of years, the four saints had actually comprehended a set of skills that could allow them to avoid the heaven's death tribulation and directly become a saint. Avoid the heavenly tribulation? Suddenly, Ling Shiqi thought of a person, or rather, a ghost. He stretched out his hand and beast ghost Zhuozhou appeared beside him. Back then, Zhuozhou ran to the demon miasma mountain range and used a secret method to make the demon sable and star and moon heavenly winged tiger become rank 7 great monsters without passing the heavenly tribulation. Even if there were some hidden dangers after the advancement, they were still rank 7 great monsters. At first, Ling Shiqi did not care much about the secret method. It was not until the beast venerable also took a fancy to the secret method that he began to pay attention to it. It was a pity that his later experiences were too complicated. He did not have the time and energy to study the secret method, so he put it aside. Now that he had seen the secret method that the four saints had researched, he remembered that Zhuozhou had done something similar. He wanted Zhuozhou's secret method. It did not matter at first glance. He found that Zhuozhou and the four saints' secret method were actually similar. Ling Shiqi could not help but look up to Zhuozhou. A Sky Origin Realm spirit cultivator was actually able to create such a miraculous secret method. The key point of this secret method was to avoid touching the power of heaven and earth. For example, Leng Shiqi's world extermination force was a powerful force that could directly trigger the will of heaven and earth. But if the world extermination force was transformed, its essence would still be the world extermination force, but the aura it emitted would be different. This way, it could avoid the will of heaven and earth. It could be said that it was an opportunistic method that was very difficult to achieve. But once it was done, Leng Shiqi would have a chance to avoid the heavenly slayer tribulation and directly become a saint. In the end, he swallowed Huang Wei Saint Venerable Saint Soul in one gulp. Just as Leng Shiqi began to plan for himself, in the passage, 6 Unity Saint Venerable, Extreme Martial Saint Venerable and Luoing Saint Venerable's faces were gloomy. The surrounding cold air was almost able to freeze the space. Huang Wei has fallen. Unbelievable. We have been forced into a desperate situation. It is time to make a decision. Extreme Martial Saint Venerable said resolutely. The other two understood what Extreme Martial Saint Venerable meant. The only way out was to personally go to the Falling Star continent. Chapter 950. They had no other chances. With the vortex erupting more frequently, they did not have enough time and strength. They could only finish everything before the next vortex erupts. Saint Master Wuji's saint power surged, and his fighting spirit soared. Let's go. The 3 saints of the Falling Star continent were about to descend. A few days later, in the mansion of the dead. Have you really made up your mind? Dao Ancestor Qingquan stood beside Leng Shiqi and asked. At this time, he had already refined Saint Master Huangwei's saint soul, and his cultivation was only a step away from becoming a saint spirit master. He nodded and said, "This is the only way. A little carelessness and you will be crushed. Won't you regret it? I don't have a choice, do I? It's good to be young. Forget it, I'll go crazy with you this time." After Dao Ancestor Qingquan finished speaking, a strong saint light rose from his body, and then all the saint light poured into Leng Shiqi's body. This is all I have left. Since I've taken the wrong path, it's better to start all over again. Your plan may have a chance of success. You've refined Saint Master Huangwei's saint soul, but it won't work if you never master real saint power. Leng Shiqi closed his eyes slightly and carefully felt the majestic saint power in his body. It was indeed different from all the powers he had mastered. With this power, his plan would definitely be much smoother. I can't repay this kindness. If you can really go against the heavens, it will be a great benefit for me. This saint power is nothing. While speaking, Leng Shiqi's expression suddenly became serious. He said, King Luanzhuan has found the other 3 saint masters. They've come out. So fast. Dao Ancestor Qingquan's expression also became serious. Their primary goal must be the dragon vein. In order to not harm the world, we can only fight them at the pole of the East Sea. How's the King of the East Sea's arrangement? All the formation masters in the world are there, using the world's best materials and the power of several Ascension Realm cultivators. Coupled with the power of the Mansion of the Dead, it can definitely pose a threat to the 4 saints. Unfortunately, it can only be used once, Dao Ancestor Qingquan replied. That's enough. After that, Leng Shiqi brought everyone from the underworld to the East Sea. After setting everything up, everyone entered the underworld and cultivated under the slowed down time, waiting for the 3 absolute saints to arrive. After the 3 saints returned to the Falling Star continent, they first went to the spirit realm that they had created, just like the Royal Might's Sacred Sovereign, and the result was just as shocked and angry as the Royal Might's Sacred Sovereign. Then, the 3 of them went to the dragon veins of the previous 3 dynasties, only to find that the 3 dragon veins were long gone. The 4 of them were extremely furious, but they didn't go on a killing spree. They didn't even alarm anyone, because those people were about to be refined in their eyes. In the end, just as Leng Shiqi expected, they came to the end of the Eastern Sea together to search for the last dragon vein. Here, they met the Leng Shiqi. Seeing the 3 saints, Leng Shiqi wasn't afraid at all. He smiled brightly and said, I've been waiting for you 3 for a long time. The moment the 3 saints saw Leng Shiqi, they felt the aura of the royal might's sacred sovereign saint soul on him, and their expressions turned cold. Luo Ying's spirit sovereign said with murderous intent, "You killed royal might's sacred sovereign?" "It doesn't matter." Ling Shiqi shook his head and said, "Do you want to avenge the royal might's sacred sovereign?" "Forgive me, but the death of the royal might's sacred sovereign means that there's one less person to share the remaining power of the falling star continent. I'm helping you, aren't I?" "Nonsense." Six Unity Holy Sovereign immediately shouted, "The four of us are like one. Today, I'll kill this little bastard to relieve the hatred in my heart." "Ha ha ha, that's right. Kill me and you can take back the power of the dragon veins. However, I have 4 dragon veins in my body. How are the 3 of you going to split them?" "You." Six Unity Holy Sovereign was about to speak. Suddenly, 9 blazing suns rose into the sky. Purple aura shone from the east, and the array set up by the Luo Ying Spirit Sovereign was melted by the 9 blazing suns. "Who is it?" Luo Ying Spirit Sovereign asked in surprise. Even though she had lost a lot of her power, only a genuine Holy Spirit Master would be able to break through the formation she had set up so easily. However, there was no such person in the world. Ling Shiqi also felt strange. He turned his head and saw a figure walking out of the blazing suns. He looked both familiar and unfamiliar. From his appearance, that person was the Pure Yang's Sacred Master. After they left the holy city, they didn't go with Ling Shiqi and the others. Instead, they left alone. However, the aura emitted by the Pure Yang's Sacred Master and his eyes told Ling Shiqi that he was no longer the Pure Yang's Sacred Master of the past. The power of the sacred light that overflowed with a wave of his hand was not much weaker than that of the 4 sacred sovereigns. Tao Ancestor Heaven and Earth suddenly said, "No wonder I felt a sense of familiarity when I first saw him. He's a sacred sovereign tens of thousands of years before me and the 10-directional Holy Devil, the supreme sage of the 9 suns." The 10-directional Holy Devil looked at him for a while and suddenly said, "I understand now. What a supreme sage of the 9 suns. I guess he left a backup plan before he entered the holy city. He kept a part of his sacred soul, sacred power, and memories because he was afraid that something would happen to him." The one who entered the holy city not long ago was probably the remnant of his soul. He obtained his original physical body inside and used the sacred power that he accumulated for 200,000 years to become who he is today. He's cautious and patient enough. Ling Shiqi also remembered that after they entered the space tunnel, the Pure Yang's Sacred Master had indeed taken away a sacred sovereign's corpse. So that was his original physical body. No, he was no longer the Pure Yang's Sacred Master. He was the supreme sage of the 9 suns. And now, it seemed that the Pure Yang Holy Temple was built with the remnant power that the supreme sage of the 9 suns left behind. It had been accumulating power for a long time until the holy city appeared. "You killed me once in the past. Let's see if you can kill me again." The supreme sage of the 9 suns burned like fire, but his words were as cold as ice. The 3 sacred sovereigns felt that they were in trouble. Judging from the supreme sage of the 9 suns' aura, his power was no different from that of an ordinary sacred sovereign. For so many years, he had not used his sacred power and had been accumulating it. On the other hand, the 3 sacred sovereigns had less than a tenth of their sacred power left. Even if they were confident that they could defeat the supreme sage of the 9 suns, it would greatly deplete their power. In this way, it would be difficult to complete their plan, not to mention transcending this world. However, the supreme sage of the 9 suns waved his hand and attacked the Luo Ying saint with the terrifying power of the sun. Back then, it was the Luo Ying saint who had killed him. "If I can kill you once, I can naturally kill you a second time." The Luo Ying saint's hands were like a fairy scattering petals as she performed countless spiritual spells. Cherry blossoms rained down from the sky and looked like they were going to destroy the 9 blazing suns. Just like that, the 2 powerful beings began to fight. Chapter 951. Spirit Venerable Luo Ying was being held back by Supreme Sage 9 Suns. Holy Venerable Wu Ji and Holy Venerable Six Directions could not be bothered to waste any more time. They knew that the longer they dragged on, the more problems would arise. Now, it was better to kill Leng Shiqi first and retrieve the power of the dragon vein. Holy Venerable Six Directions formed a seal with his hands, and an endless void appeared in the sky. As the heavens evolved, 6 holy statues that emitted a brilliant holy aura slowly descended. The space seemed to be unable to withstand that power, and it was squeezed until it emitted a strange sound. This was the holy statue of 6 directions, the real holy statue of 6 directions. Holy Venerable Six Directions pointed with his finger, and each of the holy statues did the same. Suddenly, 7 lightning-like finger forces intersected with each other and cut through heaven and earth as they charged toward Leng Shiqi. However, Leng Shiqi's body mysteriously disappeared. Then, the space behind Holy Venerable Six Directions rippled, and Leng Shiqi's arm reached out from the void. A purple light flashed, and Holy Venerable Six Directions spat out 3 feet of blood. His right arm was even broken. The holy statue of 6 directions collapsed. With just one attack, Holy Venerable Six Directions was severely injured. True Essence Flash. This was a strange move that Leng Shiqi had specially exchanged from the system. The stronger the opponent, the more damage he would suffer. This was the power of law from another world. With just one attack, he had severely injured Holy Venerable Six Directions. Holy Venerable Six Directions was shocked. He had been severely injured before the battle had even begun. How could Leng Shiqi be so strong? However, he never expected that a formless and terrifying power would suddenly surge around Leng Shiqi. It was formless and formless, but it was filled with a dangerous aura. With a gentle wave of his hand, heaven and earth froze. Everything came to a standstill. Spiritual energy, laws, aura, everything was frozen in this moment. Leng Shiqi waved his hand again, and a terrifying power that could destroy the world tore through the void. With Holy Venerable Six Directions as the center, the space within a 100-mile radius directly collapsed. Boundless spatial turbulence engulfed Holy Master Six Unity. Even though he had already broken free from the shackles of time, his body was still covered in bloody wounds. He was quite injured. In the end, Leng Shiqi waved his hands and smoothed out the collapsed space, completely banishing Holy Master Six Unity into the turbulent flow of space. As for what would happen to him, there was only death. No matter how powerful a Holy Spirit Master was, they would not be able to survive in the turbulent flow of space. Perhaps he could hold on for a while, but he couldn't hold on for a lifetime. The Leng Shiqi had suddenly erupted and killed Holy Venerate Six Unity in just 2 breaths. This was something that no one had expected. That was one of the absolute saints of the human race, Holy Sage Six Directions. How could he have died just like that? Also, no matter how strong Leng Shiqi is, he can't be this strong. Sacred Supremacy Martial Extremity was even more alarmed. He knew very well that Sacred Supremacy Six Unity still had many trump cards he had yet to use. Yet, he had been exiled just like that. Furthermore, he had never seen the power that Leng Shiqi had unleashed before. It could directly cause space to collapse, but it wasn't spatial laws. Leng Shiqi had indeed not used spatial laws, but the power of destruction. The various origins powers of a world would eventually evolve into 2 types of powers. One was the power of creation, and the other was the power of destruction. A long time ago, Leng Shiqi had attempted to fuse the various origins powers, but unfortunately, he had failed. If he succeeded, perhaps he would be able to comprehend the power of creation. In the Ashen Aeon world, he had comprehended the power of destruction by chance. It was also there that he attracted the Heavenly Slayer Tribulation. After a long period of meditation and the augmentation of the underworld's power, the power of destruction now definitely had the destructive power of destruction. It had directly killed Holy Venerate Six Unity in 1 strike. With his absolute strength, killing one of the 4 saints before they could unleash their full strength was something that Leng Shiqi had planned for a long time. No matter how long he had prepared, it was impossible for him to have prepared for longer than the 4 saints. No matter how prepared he was, he could not compare to the four saints who had accumulated strength for hundreds of thousands of years. If they were to fight slowly, no matter how many trump cards Leng Shiqi had, he would not have much confidence in winning. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. As for who to kill first, it would depend on who made the first move. Generally speaking, when the other party saw you as a true opponent, the first person to attack would not use their full strength. Instead, they would test the waters first. This was not only the habit of the four saints, but also the habit of all experts. This was because the more powerful a spirit cultivator was, the more they knew that they could not be easily injured. Therefore, when they fought, they would first test each other and roughly understand each other's strength before deciding whether to fight to the death or something else. Leng Shiqi had grasped this habit of not being noticed by others and had inconceivably killed Holy Venerate's 6 unity. However, in this way, he had consumed a lot of energy and had used the power of destruction. It was very likely that it would attract the attention of the will of the heavens and earth. He did not care, as long as he could kill one person first and make his plan go smoothly. Holy Venerate Wu Ji no longer hesitated. He took a step forward and punched out. In an instant, space trembled and the heavens and earth split open. Leng Shiqi's body blossomed with Buddhist light and devil chi rose. Other than that, there was also a boundless amount of Tao energy. The 3 completely different powers of Buddhism, Tao, and devil were perfectly combined in his body. He held up the sky with both hands and forcefully resisted the fist that shook the heavens. However, he was only sent flying a distance away and was not injured at all. Holy Venerate Wu Ji frowned. Devil arts were relatively common, and there was also Tao ancestor heaven and earth. However, the Tao energy that Leng Shiqi displayed was completely different from that of Tao ancestor heaven and earth. There was also that Buddhist light, which was a strange power that Holy Venerate Wu Ji had never seen before. He boasted that he had cultivated all kinds of arts in the world, but he had never seen such a spiritual aura. Holy Venerate Wu Ji's fingers were like a sword, and his body was like a sharp long sword. He used his body as a sword to cut through the void, and his terrifying holy aura made the heavens and earth pale. He did not have a sword in his hand, but an endless amount of sword will soared into the sky. He was not a pure sword cultivator like Chen Xian, nor was he as domineering as Holy Venerate Huang Wei. He only had the simplest sword will, but the simpler it was, the stronger it was in his hands. The Emperor of Fengdu's Dharma idol shadow appeared behind Leng Shiqi, and the power of reincarnation erupted, rotating all the power in the world. The terrifying sword will was infinitely weakened. When it reached Leng Shiqi, it was already thousands of times weaker. Countless reincarnation sword shadows easily shattered it. After devouring Holy Venerate Huang Wei's saint soul and obtaining Tao ancestor heaven and earth's saint power, Leng Shiqi's power had undergone a fundamental change. In addition, he had comprehended the law of reincarnation to the extreme. He was actually not at a disadvantage when fighting with Holy Venerate Wu Ji. Even though Holy Venerate Wu Ji's strength was only 1/10 of his original, it was still shocking enough. Holy Venerate Wu Ji was even more shocked when he could not do anything to Leng Shiqi. At the same time, he knew that he could not delay any longer. Even though Holy Venerate's 6 unity's death was actually beneficial to him, Leng Shiqi was too big of a variable. He had to kill him. Chapter 952. Martial Saint Sovereign punched out again. At this moment, a dragon's roar could be heard in midair. A divine dragon that was extremely similar to Martial Saint Sovereign rushed into the 9 heavens. He himself was also above the 9 heavens. His body was straight like a dragon spear. His punch was the tip of the spear. When the spear fell, it pierced through the heavens. This was both a punch and a spear. The fist and the spear had merged into one. Leng Shiqi had finally accumulated enough power. A Tai Chi yin-yang diagram suddenly appeared, flashing with the majestic power of yin and yang. At the same time, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared, forming 6 realms that revolved around the Tai Chi yin-yang diagram. At this moment, time and space froze. It was as if there were only the Tai Chi yin-yang diagram in the world. Everything else seemed to have been hidden in the void. Behind him, shadows of the master of Samsara, the Huang Heaven Demon Emperor, the Nether Holy Lord, and the others appeared. He had already unleashed the power of the law of Samsara to the limit. He had also merged the power of yin and yang, the power of Samsara, the power of space, and even the power of time into one. The three supreme laws combined with the power of yin and yang could create and destroy the world. It was also at this moment that a huge formation that spanned a few hundred kilometers appeared. It contained an explosive power. The formation had several formation cores, and each formation core contained a supreme treasure. For example, the Thunderfire Dynasty Supreme Treasure, the Thunderfire Heavenly Pearl, and the Starfall Dynasty Supreme Treasure, the Stellar Divine Stone. At the center of the formation, Dao Ancestor Qinkuan, the 10 Sky Fiends, Tu Deng, Meng Tianzong, and the other experts activated the formation at the same time. All of their power gathered into a sharp arrow. This arrow was only as thick as a finger. It shone with all kinds of colors and was very dazzling. The arrow locked onto Marshal Saint Sovereign. At this moment, he actually felt a trace of threat. When Sovereign Beast saw the Huang Heaven Demon Emperor appear behind Leng Shiqi, his expression changed. At the same time, he seemed to understand something. The arrow that gathered all of the strongest power in the Starfall continent suddenly shot out. It directly pierced through space, leaving a pitch-black spatial crack in the air as it shot towards Marshal Saint Sovereign with boundless power. At the same time, he had to face the Leng Shiqi's powerful origin energy and be wary of that arrow. Saint Venerable Wu Ji's blood boiled, and his veins popped out. Holy light stained with blood soared into the sky. A Dharma idol that towered into the clouds appeared behind him. The Dharma idol was actually his own appearance. Saint Venerable Wu Ji didn't believe in heaven, earth, or gods and devils. He only believed in himself. The avatar raised its hands to the sky, intending to tear the sky apart. The power that was strong enough to split the sky instantly shattered the arrow that had gathered all the power of the falling star continent. Even Leng Shiqi's Tai Chi diagram was on the verge of collapse. However, the corners of Leng Shiqi's mouth curled into a triumphant smile. What he wanted was for Saint Venerable Wu Ji to unleash his full strength, because after that, Saint Venerable Wu Ji would definitely be in a relatively weak state. His body flickered, and another Leng Shiqi stepped out. This was not his avatar, but his past self. The past Leng Shiqi directly summoned the gate of the underworld, and countless giant gray hands pulled at Saint Venerable Wu Ji from behind. Saint Venerable Wu Ji, who was suppressing the Tai Chi diagram with all his strength, didn't expect Leng Shiqi to have such a strange method. What was even more strange was that the holy power around him didn't affect those giant gray hands at all. It was as if the two of them didn't exist in the same world. He was wrong. It should be said that they didn't exist in the same time. No matter how strong Saint Venerable Wu Ji's power was, it was still the power of the present. Those giant hands came from the past. What was even stranger was that those giant hands didn't pull away Saint Venerable Wu Ji's body, but his saint soul. Ah! Saint Venerable Wu Ji screamed as his saint soul was forcefully taken away. After losing his saint soul, his aura suddenly plummeted. His holy power continued to leak out. In just a breath's time, he fell to the Ascension realm and continued to weaken. The 10 directional holy demons' demonic aura surged as he laughed loudly. Old Wu Ji, to think that you would have such a day. Then, several Ascension realm cultivators rushed forward. In just a few moves, Saint Venerable Wu Ji died. 2 absolute saints died one after another. On the other side, Luo Ying, who was still fighting with the supreme sage of the 9 suns, felt a chill run down her spine. Especially with Leng Shiqi's strange ability, she didn't have the confidence to resist. The supreme sage of the 9 suns in front of her was only slightly weaker than her. If Leng Shiqi and the others joined in, she would probably die here today. However, all of the dragon veins were in Leng Shiqi's body. If she retreated, there would be no possibility of her transcendence. However, Leng Shiqi's gaze was already locked on to her. In front of Luo Ying, he directly swallowed the holy souls of Saint Venerable 6 Unity and Saint Venerable Wu Ji. His entire body was enveloped in a dense holy light, and his aura suddenly skyrocketed. Luoying was shocked. She didn't want the dragon veins. She had to temporarily avoid them. Unfortunately, the supreme sage of the 9 suns had turned into absolute yang and blocked all of her escape routes. Under the combined efforts of Leng Shiqi and the supreme sage of the 9 suns, Luoying had fallen. At this point, the 4 absolute saints of the human race had all fallen. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they were deeply shocked by Leng Shiqi. They had actually killed the 4 absolute saints. Especially the 10 heavenly demons, Tao ancestor Qinkuan, and the supreme sage of the 9 suns. They had all been killed by the 4 absolute saints. Now that they had gotten revenge, they were really happy. Leng Shiqi didn't look happy. He continued to swallow Luo Ying's holy soul, and the holy light around his body seemed to solidify. Immediately after, his divine soul suddenly left his body and quietly turned into the color of the holy gold in front of everyone's eyes. That was a holy soul. A holy soul that only a holy spirit master could have. That's right. Leng Shiqi's goal wasn't to kill the 4 absolute saints, but to steal their holy power and ignore the will of heaven and earth to forcefully become a saint. He had done it. However, this action would definitely attract the attention of the will of heaven and earth. It was very likely that it would directly come to the falling star continent. That was not the heavenly death tribulation. It was the true will of heaven and earth. The calamity of Heavenly Slayer was only a small part of the will of heaven and earth. Back then, Leng Shiqi couldn't resist at all and was killed by the calamity of Heavenly Slayer. Now, he had to face the will of heaven and earth. Thousands of miles away, the 10 heavenly demons just smiled happily. The 4 absolute saints that had almost killed him were finally dead. However, in the next moment, his smile froze. What was Leng Shiqi trying to do? He was actually forcefully becoming a saint. Leng Shiqi, are you crazy? Forcefully becoming a saint will only attract the will of heaven and earth. When that time comes, only death will await you, and you will also implicate us. The 10 heavenly demons roared in horror. Leng Shiqi ignored the 10 heavenly demons, but Tao ancestor Qinkuan said, "Can't you see? Leng Shiqi's goal wasn't the 4 absolute saints from the beginning, but the will of heaven and earth. He did this to attract the will of heaven and earth and then destroy the heavens." Destroy the heavens? The 10 heavenly demons felt that they were hearing things. Qinkuan, that kid is crazy. Are you crazy too? 10 heavenly demons, you have been to the underworld before. You should know how mysterious and powerful it is. As the master of the underworld, Leng Shiqi has power that you and I can't imagine. Let's see if he can defy the heavens. Chapter 953. An inexplicable sound suddenly appeared in the sky. Immediately after, everyone who heard the sound felt their consciousness being greatly damaged. Immediately after, no one dared to stay any longer and retreated tens of thousands of miles away as quickly as they could. When they looked up again, they actually had the illusion that the sky seemed to have lowered. It should be said that it was getting lower and lower, as if it was about to press down on the ground. They knew that the sky had descended. Leng Shiqi looked up at the sky. This moment had finally arrived. He had forcefully become a sage and even used the power of destruction in order to draw out the will of the world. Although he had used up all his strength to kill the 3 sages, and his current state was very poor, fighting against people and fighting against the heavens was different. He had prepared more things for the will of the world. An illusory figure appeared in the sky. As soon as he appeared, the world changed color, and thousands of laws returned to him. He was the will of the world. Previously, Leng Shiqi had only seen one of his eyes during the calamity of Heaven's Slayer. Now, he had to face the will of the world. The pair of emotionless eyes glanced at Leng Shiqi indifferently. Immediately, an invisible force pressed down, as if it was about to kill Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi's expression was stern. Countless threads of different colors flashed around his body. Those were the threads of laws formed by thousands of laws. However, these were not the laws of the central plane, but the laws of the underworld. As the master of the underworld, he could barely use the laws of the underworld even in a different world. Countless threads of laws enveloped Leng Shiqi like a giant net. The power of the will of the world could be immediately discovered as long as it approached. One side of the net of laws immediately collapsed. Leng Shiqi clenched his hand, and a pitch-black energy appeared. When that energy appeared, the will of the world suddenly erupted. The might of the heavens descended and instantly shattered the giant net of laws, as if that black energy was very powerful. In fact, that energy was the origin power of the underworld. This was one of the trump cards Leng Shiqi had prepared for the will of the world. He had taken out his trump card as soon as he came up. In any case, it was either you die or I die. Immediately after, a power that could make all living things submit appeared in the 9 heavens. It was a power that could kill everything. World Force. The will of heaven and earth had actually used the power of the world to suppress the underworld's origin power. Leng Shiqi had already expected this. The underworld's origin power in his hands suddenly spread out, and the boundless netherworld aura behind him manifested everything in the underworld. He projected the world of the underworld into the central elemental plane, using the power of the world to fight against the power of the world. At the same time as the underworld world manifested, another magnificent mountain river painting appeared. Inside the painting were countless living beings. This was none other than the mountain river painting of the falling star continent. Leng Shiqi absorbed all the dragon veins and obtained the power of faith of the world. The will and faith of the people became his weapon against the will of the world. This was Leng Shiqi's strongest attack and his last chance. However, he had miscalculated one thing. The central elemental plane was now in ruins, and the world's origin power had weakened a lot. However, the underworld world had just been born. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if the underworld world and the people of the fallen star continent joined forces, they were still no match for the central elemental plane. The illusion of the underworld world disappeared, and the mountain river painting of the fallen star continent collapsed. Am I going to lose just like that? Leng Shiqi was extremely unwilling. He had used all his trump cards, but it was still not enough. In the end, he still could not defy the heavens. Unless he possessed a power even greater than the underworld's origin energy. Leng Shiqi could not believe it. What power could be stronger than the underworld world? At this moment, he suddenly seemed to have grasped something, and a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. No, of course there was a power stronger than the underworld world. The underworld world was born out of the system. In the system, the underworld was just a subsidiary territory system. What was stronger than the underworld world was naturally the system. Before deciding to fight Tian-Yi, Leng Shiqi had not thought of using the system. Unfortunately, he had searched through the system store and could not find anything that could defeat the will of the world. Even if there was something, it was not as strong as his own strength. Therefore, he did not intend to use the system. At this moment, he suddenly had some understanding. Why did he have to find something in the system to deal with the will of the world? Was the system not the most powerful power itself? Moreover, his memory suddenly returned to many years ago, when he was still on Blood Mist Island. Not long after he had obtained the system, he had a question. Where did the things that he sold to the system go? Where did the things that the system gave him come from? At that time, he did not find the answer, and no one could give him the answer. But now, he seemed to have found the answer. The will of the world's eyes flashed, and the power of the world returned to nothing, strangling Leng Shiqi everywhere. But this time, the power of the world was defeated before it could get close. At this moment, Leng Shiqi's body was surging with a strange power. This power did not belong to life, did not belong to death, did not belong to creation, did not belong to destruction, and was not even the power of the world. It was a power that had transcended life and death, and did not belong to any world. It was the system's laws. The system's laws turned into a sharp sword and slashed out. There was no sword skill to speak of, nor was there any power of the laws of the world. It was just an ordinary sword, but for the first time, the will of the world revealed a trace of fear. This sword was a threat to his life. The will of the world also moved for the first time. He waved his right hand, and endless power of the heavens descended. A wave of world power descended, wanting to suppress the sword chi. However, he miscalculated. The sword chi ignored the heavens' power and the power of the world, and shot directly in front of the will of the world. At this moment, the will of the world's body suddenly turned, and narrowly avoided the sword chi. In the blink of an eye, what awaited him was endless sword chi. The sword chi formed by the system's laws. The will of the world spread out his hands, and there was a sense of ceremony. Then, endless power of the world kept gathering, and his body became more and more solid. In the end, he was no different from an ordinary person. He did not use any skills. He held the power of the world in his hands, and was about to kill Ling Shiqi. The boundless sword energy and the power of the world kept clashing against each other. There was no sound at all, nor was there any shocking movement. Ling Shiqi's sword energy was constantly being melted away, but it was constantly being reborn. Both sides seemed to have reached a stalemate. Ling Shiqi's expression became more and more serious. Unfortunately, he comprehended the system's laws too late. If he had comprehended it earlier, he could have at least figured out some other ways to use it, but now it was a little too late. In the process of resisting the will of the world, he was also deducing the system's laws. Right now, he was just a little bit away from comprehending it, and just a little bit away from being able to suppress the will of the world. However, his body was already unable to withstand the pressure of the system's laws and the power of the world. Chapter 954. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Ling Shiqi's body began to crack, and his soul kept shaking. He could be destroyed at any time. Now, he was just a little bit away from being able to suppress the will of heaven and earth, or even kill it. However, who could help him stall for a little bit of time, or give him a little bit more power? It seemed like no one. Amitabha. At that moment, Master Tu Dang, who was tens of thousands of miles away, suddenly chanted Buddha's name. His expression was solemn as he said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Before anyone could understand why he suddenly said this, Tu Dang made an extremely shocking move. He put his palms together, and Buddhist light shot into the sky. The power of laws weaved into a golden lotus that lifted him up. Behind him, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Arhats appeared and kowtowed to him. Tu Dang's aura rose to its limit. At that moment, there was a throbbing sound from the 9 heavens. The tribulation clouds arrived instantly. It was the heavenly slayer tribulation. Everyone was shocked. Tu Dang had chosen to transcend the tribulation to become a saint. Was he crazy? They retreated tens of thousands of miles away, afraid of being affected. The 10 sky fiends cried out, "What is this old monk doing? My aura was almost exposed. If the will of heaven and earth detects it, my life will be over." However, the 9 Suns Supreme Sage said, "I see. He wants to transcend the tribulation to disperse the will of heaven and earth's power." After all, as the world's spiritual energy dissipates, the will of heaven and earth will also weaken. It will not allow Ling Shiqi to become a saint, nor will it allow Tu Dang to become a saint. However, its power is limited. By sending down 2 heavenly slayer tribulations at the same time, the pressure on Ling Shiqi will be greatly reduced. Meng Tianzong said solemnly, "Tu Dang is using his life to share some of the pressure on Ling Shiqi." Everyone fell silent. As the saying went, every man for himself. To be able to reach this step, they were all extremely selfish people. Even if they saw Ling Shiqi take on the power of the world by himself and fight against the heavens, the outcome of this battle would have a great impact on them. However, they still chose to watch from the sidelines and observe the situation. And Tuding actually used a suicidal move to help Ling Shiqi. In other words, he was helping them. "Ha ha ha, I understand, I understand." The venerable beast suddenly laughed like a madman. Everyone looked at him, wondering why he was going crazy again. He looked in the direction of the Lengshichi, his eyes shining with endless fanaticism. Shifter Emperor, let me do one last thing for you. I've been hiding my whole life, and I've had enough of hiding. After saying that, he actually revealed his true form. Demonic roars shook the sky, and he stretched out a giant arm, as if he wanted to pull down the sky. Following it, the will of the heavens and earth descended as another tribulation of heavenly death appeared. The few people beside him were shocked and angry. One ran faster than the other. Crazy, another one has gone crazy. Even if you go crazy, don't drag us into it. Lengshichi suddenly felt the power of the will of heaven and earth weaken. He scanned with his divine telekinesis and realized that it was Tudong and the venerable beast who risked their lives to trigger the tribulation of heavenly death, taking away a portion of the will of heaven and earth's power. He was originally very close to suppressing the will of heaven and earth. Although no one could give him any more power now, they were using their lives to buy him a chance. Lengshichi's system laws suddenly burst forth, weaving into an inescapable net. Strip. The loss of the will of heaven and earth's power was the final straw that broke the camel's back. As the net of laws fell, all of the power of laws in the middle element world within its range was wiped clean, and the will of heaven and earth was visibly weakened. The situation instantly reversed. You claim to be the master of the world, but I don't come from this world. Lengshichi did not give the will of heaven and earth any chance to breathe. The system laws evolved into countless alternate worlds, and traces of world power with different auras continuously gathered. Of course, only world power could defeat world power. Those alternate worlds were the imaginary worlds in Lengshichi's mind. At this moment, he actually turned illusions into reality. Lengshichi instantly absorbed the world power of the alternate worlds. The middle prime world spontaneously began to reject these foreign powers, but to no avail. Because there were too many alternate worlds. The will of heaven and earth, which had never shown any emotion, actually showed a hint of fear at this moment. Lengshichi waved one hand, and the infinite worlds descended, completely suppressing the middle prime world. How could a mere world power resist the infinite world's power? In just an instant, the will of heaven and earth was completely suppressed by the infinite worlds. One wrong step after another. Because the will of heaven and earth lost a portion of its power, Lengshichi seized the opportunity to kill it in one blow. The will of heaven and earth that looked down on all living beings in the world was finally killed by someone. Speaking of which, it was a kind of irony. After the will of heaven and earth dissipated, only a ball of golden light was left in the air. Lengshichi could feel the world's origin energy from this ball of light. It was just like the underworld's origin energy, but much stronger. He knew that as long as he refined this origin energy, he could become the will of heaven and earth of heaven and earth. When this world returned to chaos and was reborn, he would be the master of heaven and earth. But he did not refine the world's origin energy, but kept it first. When his figure appeared from the 9 heavens, anyone who saw this scene knew that the middle prime world sky had changed. For the next tens of thousands of years, the middle prime world would be ruled by this person. Lengshichi did not care about the gazes of others. He turned to look at Tudong and the venerable beast. Because the will of heaven and earth had fallen, the two's heavenly slayer tribulations had naturally dissipated. Tudong was very strong, and the dharma he cultivated was not of the middle prime world, so he only suffered some light injuries. On the other hand, the venerable beast was a little worse off. At this moment, his towering body was covered in wounds, and blood flowed like a river. Fortunately, he still had his breath. Lengshichi shot out a brilliant green light, and rich vitality enveloped the venerable beast, quickly healing his wounds. If not for Tudong and the venerable beast's heavenly slayer tribulations, he might not have had the chance to kill the will of heaven and earth. Words cannot express my gratitude. I will remember your kindness in my heart. Unexpectedly, the two shook their heads, and the venerable beast said sincerely, "It is my honor to be able to die for the Yao Emperor." Tudong chanted a Buddhist mantra, "Almsgiver, you should focus on healing your wounds." The power of 10,000 realms was not something that could be easily withstood. Although Ling Shiqi had won this battle, his body was covered in cracks. Even the blood in his body had been burned to nothing. If not for his incredible physical strength, he would have died long ago, along with the will of heaven and earth. Yao Emperor, you are injured. The venerable beast was shocked at first, then he stood vigilantly beside Ling Shiqi. Although the will of heaven and earth was dead, Ling Shiqi was also seriously injured, and it was not safe at this time. The 9 Suns Supreme Sage and the 10 heavenly demons came one after another. They originally thought that once the will of heaven and earth dissipated, they would be able to return to the Saint Plane, but after several attempts, they still could not do so. Tudong, the venerable beast, and Meng Tianzong stood in front of Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi, we lent you our saint power. Now that the will of heaven and earth has fallen, why can't we sense the Saint Plane? The 10 heavenly demons questioned. Ling Shiqi knew their purpose, and he said, don't waste your time. The spiritual power of this world is no longer able to give birth to saint spirit masters. However, you still have your saint souls. Once the spiritual power reappears, you will be able to return to the Saint Plane. Really? I won't lie to you. Being able to kill the will of heaven and earth is also due to your contributions, but you need to understand one thing. At this point, Ling Shiqi's eyes were cold, and a surge of heavenly power descended, causing them to tremble in fear. The heavens cannot be doubted. These words exploded in their ears like thunder, and it caused their saint souls to tremble violently, almost collapsing. At this moment, they finally understood that standing in front of them was not the Ling Shiqi of the past, but a new heavens. Chapter 955. He had finally finished writing the book. I started writing in September 2019 and finished in September 2021. It took me 3 years. He had spent 3 years to write a book that barely had 2 million words. It was truly embarrassing. The author also used his spare time to write. At first, he saved 100,000 manuscripts and published it with the attitude of giving it a try. I was signed after 2 chapters, which gave me great motivation. When there was an epidemic, I had nothing to do at home, so I could write several chapters almost every day. I also capriciously published several times, so I didn't have many manuscripts left. After going to work normally, there was a lot of work backlog. Every day was very tiring, and the writing state was also very bad. It was difficult to maintain the standard of 2 chapters a day. So the book became 1 chapter a day. What moved me was that some readers expressed their understanding. And I want to say sorry, this book was unfinished for a while. The end of May was the busiest time of the year for the author. I really didn't have the time and energy to write a book. At most, I could occasionally think about the next plot. Fortunately, this book was finally finished. I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief because this was a long-time dream of mine. I had written some novels since high school, but none of them stuck, and none of them were published. It wasn't until my job was stable that I made up my mind to fulfill this childhood dream. However, more than 10 years had passed. The book's results weren't good. It could even be said that it was a complete failure, but I still survived. I have to thank the readers who have always supported me. Every time I wanted to give up, they kept encouraging me. Naturally, there were a lot of regrets in the book. The last 100,000 words should have been more than 500,000 words of content. A lot of the specific plot was simplified, resulting in some characters not being established. Fortunately, the holes dug were basically filled. Regrets weren't necessarily a bad thing. In life, it was impossible to do everything perfectly. Just like the Ling Shiqi in the book, even if he transcended this world, there were still hidden dangers and regrets. Only with regrets would there be motivation and desire to continue. When I typed the words, "The book is finished," I suddenly understood the mentality of the ancient scholars. This book had tens of thousands of collections. In this world, so many people had read my work. Even if one day I was no longer here, it would more or less leave a trace in this world. Thinking about it, it was quite good. I will continue to write the book, but I won't easily publish it again. Work was getting busier and busier, and there were more and more trivial things to do at home. I could only squeeze out some spare time to write. Without the pressure of updating, perhaps my inspiration would be richer. The structure of this book has some ideas. This time, I won't care too much about the results. At the very least, I will save millions of words before I publish it. Alright, fellow Taoists, let's meet again if fate allows. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.